In Australian cricket, winning isn't an achievement. It's more an absence of crisis. Victory is expected, dominance doesn't surprise, and loss is criminal. Australia have by far the most test wins in history, the longest test match win streak of 16 straight test wins, achieved twice, and have conquered every corner of the cricketing world. So when the underdogs from Bangladesh travel to Australia for the first time in over 2 decades for a red ball tour, get bundled out for just 54 runs in a warm-up game against a C-string Australian side, and are up against Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins and Lyon at home, you'd expect them to get steamrolled. But it was Bangladesh who outplayed Australia in every facet, crushing the hosts by 9 wickets. Nothing can be taken away from Bangladesh. They pressed the advantage in each of the 11 sessions and secured their first ever win on Australian soil in Test cricket. The Vultures have re-emerged over the Australian Test side, as they seem to do after any defeat at home, except not with such ferocity in a long time. Since 2024, what seemed to be a champion Australian side has lost at the Gabba to an inexperienced West Indies side, lost by the biggest ever margin at the Perth Optus Stadium, and their second worst ever loss to India at home, and have allowed a touring Bangladesh team on just their second ever tour down under to crush them on home turf. The average age of Australia's playing 11 in their last test was 33.4. Mitchell Starc is 36, Josh Hazelwood is 35, Pat Cummins is 33, and Nathan Lyon is 38. Their youngest player was Cameron Green, who's 27 and already has 38 tests under his belt. Their most inexperienced player, Jake Weatherald, has played just 6 tests, debuting in last year's Ashes at 31, and has already been axed ahead of the second test versus Bangladesh. His replacement, the 30-year-old Matt Renshaw, who's played 14 tests between 2016 and 2023. Is age really the issue? New Zealand's original playing 11 in the third test against England had an average age of 31.5, not far from Australia. Still, they managed an away series win in England, making a comeback after being 1-0 down in the series. This is the same team who also whitewashed India in India during the previous World Test Championship cycle. This very Australian team themselves have also shown that age does not equate to quality. They came back to win the Border Gavaskar Trophy 3-1 after an embarrassing loss in the first test, registered a 2-0 sweep in Sri Lanka for the first time since 2003, whitewashed the West Indies at home, and won a home Ashes within the first 3 tests last summer. So why exactly are Australia under so much scrutiny with regards to the age of their players? Many teams have had eras of unmatched dominance. The West Indies of the 70s and 80s, South Africa in the late 2000s to early 2010s. Only Australia, though, have been able to have multiple eras at the undisputable top. Yet after each of Australia's periods of success seems to come an inevitable fall, almost off a cliff. Looking at Australia's 25-test win-loss ratio, Australia unsurprisingly dominated the post-war era, peaking with a win-loss ratio of nearly 20 in 1951. For much of this era, they had Don Bradman, Keith Miller, Ray Lindwall, Lindsay Hassett, stretching to Neil Harvey and Arthur Morris later on. But the bulk of these players retired in the mid-1950s, coinciding with Australia's rolling win-loss ratio dropping below par in the 1950s. But Australia didn't take long to recover, with Richie Benaud, Bob Simpson, and Bill Lawry in the 1960s. Even without direct replacements to the players of the 50s, Australia found players to step up in different roles and maintain their status as a formidable test side. The first real transition issue came in the early 1980s. In 1984, Greg Chappell, Dennis Lillee, and Rod Marsh retired after the same test against Pakistan. Australia lost their best bowler, batter, and keeper all in one swoop. Jeff Thomson's retirement followed just a year later. After peaking with a rolling win-loss at close to 7 in 1976, Australia saw their lowest ever period in Test history from 1979 to 1989, nearly an entire decade where they were below par on win-loss. From being the second best bowling side in the 70s, with the second lowest bowling average and best strike rate, Australia flopped to the bottom from 1984 to 1987. Once Lillee and Thomson retired, Australia struggled, averaging 39.94, 10 runs more per wicket than the previous decade, while taking over 11 more balls per wicket than before. Not only did Australia see a decline, but their competitors were far stronger now. The West Indies were on another planet, averaging just 23.2 and taking a wicket every 52 balls from 1984 to 1987. By the late 80s, Australia were able to rebuild around Dean Jones, Merv Hughes, David Boone, Steve Waugh, Mark Taylor, and of course, the great leader Alan Border. They went on to win their first World Cup in 1987. Even as they established a new era of dominance, though, they didn't forget the lows of the previous decade. Interestingly, it seemed as though this drought taught Australia how to properly manage transitions. From Alan Border to Mark Taylor to Steve Waugh to Ricky Ponting, Australia found 4 successive captains who led Australia to the top of world cricket for nearly 20 straight years. Their lowest period from 1990 to 2009 was when Mark Taylor took over from Alan Border in 1994, and even then, they still managed a solid win-loss ratio well over 2. For 20 straight years, they never had a dull moment. The early 2000s brought about what is widely regarded as Australia's golden generation, under Steve Waugh and Ricky Ponting. In this period, they went on a 16-match win streak from 1999 to 2001 under Steve Waugh, then tied their own 16-win record again from 2006 to 2008 under Ponting. They were absolutely unbeatable everywhere in the world, with their rolling win-loss ratio never dropping below 3.0 in this period. However, much like the 70s, reaching such unimaginable heights meant that when the team's spine was pulled at once, Australia saw new lows. Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath, and Justin Langer all retired together in 2007 after cementing a home Ashes whitewash. Damien Martin also just quit earlier that series. Australia once again lost several key players, their greatest ever spinner, their best quick, and 2 long-term reliable top and middle order batters. Jason Gillespie had already played his last test a year earlier, and within the next 18 months, Adam Gilchrist, Brett Lee, and Matthew Hayden all stepped away from Test cricket. Captain Ricky Ponting was tasked with rebuilding the side, practically from scratch, having lost nearly every piece to Australia's puzzle in a short span. Australia saw another low period in their Test history in the early 2010s, arguably more harsh on the players given the heights their team had just achieved a few years ago. Despite notable fresh talent coming of age, like Michael Clarke, Australia struggled with the transition. This time, it was the batting that significantly declined. From 1994 to 2008, Australia's golden era, the Aussies were by far the best batting side. Having played the second most tests, they unsurprisingly stacked the most runs at over 91,000 and the most centuries at 230 in this time. But they also averaged the most per wicket at 37.32. South Africa had the next best runs per wicket at 34.48. From 2009 to 2011, Australia's batting had fallen off, with runs per wicket dropping to 33.51, the 5th best among teams with at least 5 tests in this time. They also had just 3,500s in this time, 14 less than England, who played only 2 more tests than Australia. They lost a home Ashes series in 2010-2011, their first home loss since the summer of 1986. They went on to lose 3 consecutive Ashes series from 2009 to 2013. Since 1897, England has only won 3 consecutive Ashes 3 times, in the mid-1950s, the late 1970s to early 1980s, and 2009, 11, and 13. All 3 of these periods were times of significant transition for Australia, where they lost the bulk of the team in quick succession and were in a prolonged period of rebuilding. It took Australia until 2013-2014, when they whitewashed England at home again in the Ashes, to look as formidable as they once did. It seemed like the mid-2010s would begin another golden age for Australia. Mitch Johnson was breathing fire. Young Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins had already made their mark in Test cricket. Nathan Lyon looked to be a promising long-term prospect. And by 2014, Australia had a decent batting core with Steve Smith and David Warner around Michael Clarke. However, things didn't quite pan out as Australia would have hoped. Clarke's sudden retirement in the 2015 Ashes was a shock, and with the 2018 Sandpaper Gate incident that kept Smith, Warner, and Bancroft out of Test cricket for a year, crisis hit Australia. Given the circumstances, Tim Paine managed a reasonable record as captain in the tough time for Australian cricket. Paine was also at the center of controversy though, and was sacked ahead of the 2021 home Ashes series. Australia seemed to face curveball after curveball in what otherwise seemed to be a promising era with a talented pool of players. That is when Pat Cummins stepped up as captain. Cummins sealed a convincing 4-0 home Ashes win and finally seemed to set Australia back on track. They now had a settled side, with Marnus Labuschagne and Travis Head having cemented their places in the 11, and Usman Khawaja making a remarkable comeback at the end of the Ashes. With a bowling attack to envy and a batting lineup that finally seemed to find balance, Australia found another phase of dominance. The Aussies secured their first series win in Asia since 2011 in a 1-0 win against Pakistan. After a successful home summer against the West Indies and South Africa, they bagged their first World Test Championship title in 2023 and went on to secure the ODI World Cup in India too. The following summer, they finally won the Border Gavaskar Trophy after a decade, swept Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka 2-0, whitewashed the West Indies in the Caribbean, and won a home Ashes 4-1. The Cummins era has been a restoration of dominance for Australia. Their rolling win-loss has stayed well above 2.0, peaking at nearly 4.0 in 2022. So why all the noise now? Despite resounding victories on paper, the current Australian side have more than shown a few cracks in their armor. Many of their batters have struggled with consistency, and the bowling cartel that has served Australia for over a decade has been prone to injuries. Take a look at the batting first. Since Cummins took over, until David Warner's retirement, Australia had 5 batters averaging over 45. Mitchell Marsh, Usman Khawaja, Steve Smith, Marnus Labuschagne, and Travis Head. In fact, David Warner was the only pure batter who averaged below 35. However, since Warner's retirement in early 2024, only Steve Smith averages above 45. Warner's retirement itself had a significant domino effect. Australia tried out Smith, Labuschagne, Head, McSweeney, Constas, and Weatherald as Khawaja's partner up top, and none of them really worked. Khawaja's own batting form dipped, as he averaged just over 30 since Warner's departure until he retired. Travis Head finally seemed to solve this issue with his magnificent, game-changing century in the first test of the Ashes last year. However, Khawaja retired after the fifth and final test, leaving another opening spot up for grabs. Importantly, the three debutants blooded in this experiment at the top of the order, Nathan McSweeney, Sam Constas, and Jake Weatherald, only got 14 tests between them, with Weatherald having the most at 6 games. None of them got a truly extended period with the Aussie side to get accustomed to the demands of Test cricket. Once again, Australia seemed to be making the same mistake, pushing Matt Renshaw to the top of the order. One can only hope they will give him a longer rope. Labuschagne and Green have also come under scrutiny. Labuschagne averages just 23 since Warner retired, with Green not far ahead at 33. While Green may have bought some time with his crucial century against Bangladesh in the first test, Labuschagne has been on thin ice. At the same time, though, very few batters seem to be tearing down the door to break into the side. Matt Renshaw was the only batter not in the national setup to finish last season's Sheffield Shield with an average over 40. Among the top 10 run getters in the Sheffield Shield 2025-2026, Curtis Patterson's average of 36 was the highest. Just 36. Perhaps a lack of prodigal talent gives room to the current Australian side to rediscover their footing. Still, why the last 3 debutants haven't gotten extended runs is unanswerable. The bowling transition is arguably more worrying. Every one of Australia's tough transitions in their test history has been facilitated by a drop-off in bowling, and rightfully so. You don't win a test until you pick all 20 wickets. Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, and Lyon have done an exceptional job over the last decade, especially since Cummins took over captaincy in 2021. Australia are the only team with 4 pacers having a bowling average 25 or under in this time. No other team has more than 2 pacers, among bowlers with at least 60 wickets in this time. All of Australia's pacers also pick a wicket every 45 balls or quicker. Other teams can only dream of having a bowling attack that is this consistent and lethal all round. Nathan Lyon has more than held his own too, with the 4th best bowling average for a spinner in this time. Outstanding, given he plays most of his games without spin-friendly conditions in Australia. Whether it was Ironman Mitchell Starc's unforgettable Ashes 2025, Pat Cummins bringing himself on to pick a crucial wicket and break a partnership, Scott Boland ripping through India in the 2024-2025 Border Gavaskar Trophy, or Hazelwood stepping up in tough conditions, the cartel has bailed Australia out of several close games. This would be the ideal time for Australia to rope in newer batters and give them experience, under the shield of an in-form premier bowling lineup. Yet with every test, it seems the batters' places are only more safe, despite a lack of runs. Australia seems to be rewarding mediocrity, not something they're known to do in their test history. None of Australia's pacers are younger than 33. Cummins and Hazelwood played a combined 1 test last summer, being sidelined with injuries. Even the backups are getting no younger. Scott Boland is 37, Michael Neser is 36, and last summer's debutant Brendan Doggett is 32. The cartel may be able to shield Australia's batting weaknesses for another year, maybe 2, maybe even 3. But when they will leave a gaping hole in the Australian side, much like in the early 80s and late 2000s. At the same time, Australia are lost with who will replace Nathan Lyon. Todd Murphy and Matt Kuhneman have had a go in the test circuit and held their own. Both have had successful tours in the subcontinent, particularly Kuhneman in his 2 tests in Sri Lanka, where he picked 16 wickets. Kuhneman's also had a solid Shield season last summer, averaging just 21.54 in 7 innings. Australia could also give Corey Rakacholi a go. The 28-year-old finished as the 4th highest wicket taker in the last Shield season, and looks comfortable in Australian conditions, key to becoming a successor to the pedigree of Nathan Lyon. With every passing test, Australia trudges closer and closer to an inevitable fork. Their schedule has never been more packed. After the Bangladesh series, the Aussies are set to tour South Africa for 3 tests, host New Zealand for 4 tests, tour India for 5 tests, play a one-off game against England, potentially play in the World Test Championship final in 2027, and play an away Ashes in late 2027. Can the bowlers hold on for a packed year of Test cricket? Will the batters start producing runs when it matters? Should Australia bring in young blood straight into these important series? The changing of eras was always impending, but it now seems more urgent than ever. How will Australia navigate this transition? Read the full story on BailsOffCrick.com.